What are we doing? We're in a steep bank to the left, well, 30-degree bank to the left. Rattenberg, where we need to go to waypoint, is all the way up there, but for whatever reason, the JARDesign A330 has decided, nah, that doesn't look very interesting. We'll just throw a left here. Hello fellow simmers, you've joined me here on the ground at Innsbruck in the JARDesign A330. This is Derek at FS Pro with part 4 of my review of the JARDesign A330. Today I'm concentrating on programming the MCDU. Okay, so I'm going to compare this against an Airbus that I know fairly well, certainly by comparison with the JARDesign A330, and an MCDU that I'm accustomed to programming. So let's see how these two things compare. Now the Airbus I'm comparing against, for those of you who haven't seen any of my videos on it, is the Aerosoft Airbus A320 series. Great simulation, I think, thoroughly enjoyable, and I think it works extremely well. So it's interesting to see how the JARDesign A330 compares against it. I'm pretty much ready to go here, apart from a few bits and pieces, so let's go and do those now. Go down to the MCDU and onto the init page. So the first thing I'm asked to enter is the departure and destination airfields. So that's Lima, Oscar, Whiskey, India, and Lima, Foxtrot, Mike, November, Innsbruck to Nice on the Côte d'Azur. This is a strange trip to make in an A330. I doubt very much one would want to take off from a runway of only 2 kilometers in length, but what it does allow me to do is to compare with a journey that I've done quite regularly with the Airbus A319. Next thing the instructions have asked me to do is to enter in an alternate destination. Now I can't here because this is where I would enter it on an Airbus normally, but there's no text here, and if I try to enter in an alternate destination, nothing happens. So a down side there, or a down mark, whichever way you want to look at it, for the JARDesign A330. Let's align the IRS, and I'll enter in the code. Let's go REF124 for this one, for the flight number, and for the cost index we'll stick at 30. Cruising flight level 310. Now I should be able to enter 310 for the flight level, / and then the temperature expected at that altitude, and or it would calculate it for me automatically. Unfortunately I can't do any of this in the JARDesign. The only thing it will enable you to enter is a cruising flight level. Okay, across to the second page of the init, and I'm going to enter in the block fuel. I can't enter it in myself directly here. I just click this button and the JARDesign A330 picks it up from the amount of fuel that's actually on the board, which you can see if I can just stretch this up far enough here. Okay, and let's enter in the 0 fuel weight as well. As a result of that, it's done an awful lot of calculation. And oddly enough, it's claiming now that my cruising flight level is too high. That's not quite true. I've still got to go and enter in the flight plan yet, so let's do that and see what happens next. Although notice it has cleared out the cruise flight level here. Over to the flight plan. First difference I see between this and the Aerosoft Airbus is that there is no indication on here of the top of climb and top of descent pseudo waypoints. So that's a difference in the way they operate. Which one is right I don't know. Never piloted a real Airbus. If you have, and or you know, please leave me a comment below. Alright, let's go around entering in the details of the flight. First of all, let's select the departure airports, and we're going to be departing from runway 08. The SID we'll use is Rattenberg RTT2J. There we are. No transition, that's all fine. Insert that into the temporary flight plan. And we're good. Let's go all the way through till I get to RTT. Enter INN into the scratch pad and put that in for the next waypoint. Done. Then select INN. And this time we're going to enter in airway and waypoint pairs. And I'm going to enter Uniform Mike 726 for the airway, and that's to go to Bravo Zulu Oscar. Now I should, and I can in the Aerosoft Airbus, enter a further 4 airways and destinations before having to put them into the temporary flight plan. Clearly, the JARDesign A330 is not allowing me to do that. I've got to enter it into the flight plan, then insert it, then scroll up to find that last entry, select it, and select airways again. That's going to get really tedious really quickly. So yeah, that's not so good. Not so good. Let's enter in the rest of the flight plan anyway. 984 to Everno. And then Uniform Zulu 185. To Bordy. That looks good. Now let's select the destination and the details for it. We're going to land on ILS 04 left, so we'll select that. The star will be the Bordy 6C, and we'll be approaching via Neras. So that's all good. And that should be everything entered. Make sure we've got no discontinuities anywhere. Nope, that looks good. Let me just double check that I've done all this correctly. Yep, that seems to be it. Okay, now let's double check some of the constraints. Quick reminder on what some of those constraints are. So here's Bordy. That's one of the waypoints on our route. And at Bordy we should be at flight level 170. From there we come down to Amjad where we throw a left, at which point we want to be flight level 110 as we get to Mikru. Then flight level 110 continuing down to Pyram. Then flight level 70 flying around toward Neras. And in fact at Neras I will want to be at 4,000 feet. Here we are. Initial approach fix Neras 4,000 feet. And then I come around here along this arc again at 4,000 feet. All the way around. Speed constraint here of 200 knots. Before turning in for the approach in to land at Nice. Alright. So the first thing I want to look at is Bordy. So let's find that. Now these constraints were entered automatically when I programmed this into the Aerosoft Airbus. Both the Aerosoft Airbus and this JARDesign A330 are making use of the same air rack. So let's see what constraints are entered for Bordy. I'm not seeing any on the MCDU, which is a surprise. I would have expected to see that, but I'm not. Okay, let's go to the revisions page and there's nothing entered here anyway, so let's enter 17,000 as an altitude constraint for Bordy. So straight to the temporary insert, let's try that, and let's select Bordy again. Notice it's not showing on this page. Let's try that, Okay, so the constraint is showing here. Whether that will work, let's find out in flight. Next constraint I want is to be at flight level 110 at MCRU. So MCRU, again nothing entered, so that'll be 11,000 feet at MCRU. Next constraint I'll want is to be at flight level 70 by Pyrum. So Pyrum, nothing here. 7,000 feet at Pyrum. And I see the constraints here are indicated by a star showing here, but it's not giving me any indication what the constraint is. And the next thing I want is Neras, where we have a constraint, altitude constraint of 4,000 feet. Again, there's nothing here, so I'm going to have to enter it by hand. That's done. And the next one really will be, let's have a look. So I'm going to choose C1297 and try to enter in a speed constraint here of 200 knots. And it won't let me. Okay, well that's a bit of a blow, so I can't enter in a speed constraint there. So I can enter in an altitude constraint, but not a speed constraint. Okay, well that'll prove a challenge. Let's see how we do anyway. So to summarize programming the MCDU then, entering in airway and waypoint combinations is very clunky with the JARDesign A330, and it's nowhere near as good as it is in the Aerosoft Airbus. And I think the Aerosoft Airbus models reality better, if I remember what I read in the FCOMS and flight crew training manuals correctly. Entering constraints should be done automatically when entering the flight plan in the MCDU. Clearly, it has not been with the JARDesign A330, so that's a bit of a letdown. Entering constraints by hand on the JARDesign A330 is challenging. You can enter in an altitude constraint, but you cannot enter a speed constraint. And I can tell you from experience, you can do both of those things successfully in the Aerosoft Airbus. Final thing I'd note is that the constraints that I do enter are not indicated on the flight plan at the moment. Again, they are indicated here on the Aerosoft Airbus. Now I do remember when I came in here to do this that after I had gone to the performance page and entered in the init page, the initial page, and entered in the flight level, it was quite happy until I entered in the details on page 2 with the block fuel, where it decided that the cruising flight level of 310 was too high. Well, let's try it again and see what effect this has on everything else. So now it will allow me to enter in a cruising flight level of 310, presumably because I've entered in the flight plan. Let's make sure the block fuel is still showing correctly, which it is, and our takeoff weight and landing weight are indicated. They're both green, so that's good. Let's go back to the flight plan and see if we notice any change here. And now we're showing the flight levels that we should be at for each stage of our trip. So that's good. Let's scroll through, see if we can see anything else. Now, for some really strange reason, I'm noticing that even though for Neras, where I've entered in a constraint of 4,000 feet, it's declaring it's going to be at 4,418. So here you can see my altitude constraint 4,000 feet, but it's saying nope, 4,418. So I guess that's a prediction based on the flight level here and what it thinks it can achieve between Pyrum and Neras. But looking at the chart, it's quite a bit long distance between the two. I think it should be able to do it. Okay, well, that's a bit of a conundrum. So I'm in two minds whether to leave this at 70 and see how it copes, or to make this a lesser altitude, because between Mikru and Pyram we go from 11,000 feet to 7,000 over a distance of 21 miles. Okay, well, let's change the constraint here then. I said 7,000. Let's make it 6,500. See if that's going to change anything. And the answer is no. So never mind, I've put in a constraint here of 4,000 feet. The JARDesign A330 has decided, for whatever reason, nope, I'm only going to get to 4,418 there, which is bizarre. Well, let's turn this back to 7,000, which is what it should be. Any other constraints that are throwing us off? So there's a speed constraint of 220 popped up here, although actually that's on the approach as opposed to the speed constraint that was showing on the chart. This is much further into the approach than the initial one. Let's carry on, see if there's anything else we can see. Nope. The other thing I note is that after Nice itself, there's no other entry here on the flight plan at all. On the Aerosoft Airbus, the go-around details are entered here. Not so on the JARDesign A330. I don't know why. I don't know which one is right. But certainly there's a difference between the two of them. Okay, let's scroll back to the beginning of the flight plan. I notice now we're showing our top of descent, and hopefully our top of climb will show on the plan as well. Yes, indeed, there it is. That's good stuff. I do find it difficult sometimes knowing which arrows to push to scroll the flight plan in the direction I want it to, because it runs exactly opposite to the way that it works in Windows. Okay, so there's the flight plan as far as we can see. Let's take a look at this on the navigation display. So the first thing that I can see, in fact let's zoom in a bit because this is interesting. The first thing I can see is that from the point we take off, we're expected to fly immediately to the left and then fly almost a right angle to parallel the runway from where we took off. Now, this is very odd, isn't it? I know on the Airbus, when we take off, we do need to come a bit to the left, not too much so, to intercept a track, but it's not modelled the way that it's modelled here on the JARDesign A330. That's interesting. I wonder how that's going to come out in the flight. Well, we'll leave it be and we'll see what happens. So with the flight plan entered, let me see what else I need to do to get us ready to take off. One thing I can do is go to the RadNav page on here. Now on the Aerosoft Airbus, I can enter in the ADF and frequency for the Rattenberg NDB just by entering in the code for the NDB. Let's try it here. No, nothing at all. It's not going to work. So another difference there between the two aircraft. Block fuel we've entered, zero fuel we've done. Let's go to the performance page. Now on here, on the Airbus, I enter in the flaps first. So I'm going to enter in 2 / up 4.3. Let's see what happens. Oh, and it allows it. So, okay, that's great. Just dialing that straight in has worked fine. Now, if I click it on its own, you'll see it says 1 up 4.5 because it has calculated that that's what it thinks is the right setup for a takeoff from this airport. So, well, okay, we'll leave it at what it has calculated. Let's see how it goes. We're on a very short runway here, as you know, which leads to my next surprise. It's indicating a flex takeoff of 44, whereas even the Airbus A319 indicates, thank you, indicates that we need a man-toga takeoff. So I'm going to ignore this here. We'll go for a man-toga takeoff. Transition altitude at Innsbruck is 11,000 feet, so I'll enter that. Incidentally, once I'd entered in the flap setting here on the Aerosoft Airbus, it automatically calculated V1, V-rotate and V2, but here I need to select each of them for the JARDesign A330. Likewise, these were calculated for me automatically in the Aerosoft Airbus, but I need to click to select them here in the JARDesign A330. So that's that information entered. What else do I want to do? Flaps we have done. Flex takeoff has been calculated. Thrust reduction altitude, all good. ND mode and range. Okay, let's take a look at our FCU. So what do we have? Arc 10 miles, that's fine. Let's put the speed and the heading into managed mode. I'm going to dial my first altitude at 11,000, I think. Actually, yeah, 11,000 would be fine. And put that into managed mode as well. So dash dot altitude dot dash is the setup we want to see on the FCU. We're all good there. And okay, I think that is us pretty much good to go. Let's do the other things we need to do in preparation for takeoff then. Signs are on, cabin check, spoilers arm. Let's do that. Set the flaps for takeoff, which is flaps 1. Auto brake to max. And our takeoff config is normal. The APU is available. We've got the packs on, so I'll leave the APU running for now. That's fine. Next thing I want to do is to release the parking brake when we're ready to go, which I think we are. So let's do that. Release the parking brake. Move the throttle slowly forward to make sure the engines are doing as we expect them to do. Everything is looking good. Full man-toga, SRS, and let's go. Push the nose forward just to keep us in contact with the runway. You'll notice that the runway here does undulate a bit, and we're going to get a bit of bounce as we move along here. So we're at 100 knots. Release the back or release the forward pressure. V1 coming up. And let's get up.
Positive climb. Gear up.
Let's get the gear up. Now I'm just going to climb straight ahead for now, rather than going immediately to the left. And I have to watch the flight director here to make sure that I keep a good climb and don't lose too much speed. Okay, lever to climb. I move on to the autopilot. And you can see this pronounced bank to the left to intercept this track here shown on the navigation display.
Standard Barrow cross-check. Passing flight level 039.
Okay, good. Everything coming along nicely. There's the S-speed, so we can retract the flaps. And I'm going to dial our cruising flight level in. There we go. And we can enjoy the wonderful scenery for a little while now as the autopilot and auto thrust do their things. I'll just disarm the ground spoilers. And now we're airborne. I can get rid of the APU. The engines can take over the running of the packs. Beautiful scenery. I envy the pilots that get to fly this route and get to see this every day. Let's see what the first officer's on about as regards the lights. We don't need runway turn off now, or indeed the nose light. We'll leave the landing lights on, of course we still need that. See if we can enjoy the scenery a little bit more here. Oops. That's quite a view, isn't it? Down the valley towards Innsbruck airport just there. Quite a remarkable view. We're levelling off at 10,000. I can, well, while we're only levelling at 10,000, so we can increase speed, but it is an indication I can turn our landing lights off. And then once we've got up to speed, we'll continue our climb up to our cruising altitude. Also, I can engage standard for the pressure indications when I clear 11,000 feet, which is the transition altitude, of course. And that's done. And, oh! What are we doing? We're in a steep bank to the left, well, 30-degree bank to the left. Rattenberg, where we need to go to waypoint, is all the way up there, but for whatever reason, the JARDesign A330 has decided, nah, that doesn't look very interesting. We'll just throw a left here. I have no idea why it's done that. Yes, we need to come back this way, and maybe it's calculated that instead of bothering going all the way up there, we can just chuck a UE and get back onto course a lot quicker. Which may be a triumph of mathematics over air traffic instruction or good flying procedure. So that's a bit strange. That's not something I would have expected to see. So I think there's probably a bit of a black mark there for the JARDesign A330 MCDU and or FMGS in the way it's handled that. Well, I wonder what's got in store for us for the rest of the flight. So we know our first constraint is at Bordy, appearing on the navigation display now, and for that we need to be at flight level 170. We're currently at flight level 250, or just below it. And I'm noticing over here that our speed is starting to increase. So we've got the throttle at idle, we're just about maintaining the descent slope, and our speed is starting to increase. All this tells me that shortly we may get a request to provide more drag to help to slow the aircraft down so it can maintain an appropriate rate of descent. I can see a slight flickering appearing here on the PFD, which is a giveaway.
We need more
there we go.
drag, sir.
That we need to provide more drag. So let's do that.
Spoilers half. Spoilers full.
It looks like we made it okay then. 17,000 feet at Audi. Our next constraint is at Micru, where we want to be at 11,000 feet if memory recalls. Let's have a look at the MCDU. Micru. So it's showing 10,545, but if I look here, yes, the altitude constraint is 11,000 feet. Okay, we're coming towards Neras now, where we need to be at 4,000 feet. We've gone just below the transition altitude of 5,000 feet now, so let's reflect that. And set the QNH, which at the moment, of course, is 1013. We're working on standard pressure. Okay, we seem to be doing all right. You'll probably notice here on the navigation display that we have got a blue line here. And that blue line actually is part of the go-around procedure. So although there's nothing showing on the MCDU for the go-around, there is something here showing on the navigation display. This is different from the way it's represented in the Aerosoft Airbus, but again, as to which one is right, I don't know. I've never flown either. So it could be a case, I suppose, even that the Airbus A320 series does one thing and the A330 series does another. So we've hit this odd altitude thing here, where for whatever reasons the MCDU was indicating, nope, we're not going to make 4,000, we're going to do it at 4,400 and some instead. So Yabu sucks to you. Let's take a quick look at it as well now so we can see what it's currently showing. And it's showing 4418 for reasons that confuse and confound. Well, me certainly. I don't know about you. The next constraint we're showing here is at NI 122, when we should be at, again, 4,000 feet altitude. Yep, there's the constraint entered in there. So I guess we'll just have to see whether or not we hit that one, or whether it decides to change its mind about that one too. Okay, so we're flying the DME arc now. One thing I have noticed about the Airbus A330 from JARDesign, in that the way it flies the arc pattern is to take little bites out of the arc as it goes around, whereas the Aerosoft Airbus just seems to calculate and dial in one continuous gentle bank to come all the way around. The JARDesign A330 does it, as I say, bite by bite. I don't know why, but I do think that Aerosoft are closer to the real world with their implementation of it. Okay, let's go and initiate our approach phase.
Approach phase activated.
And that'll slow us down to the requisite speed as we come into the approach to land at Nice. So I'll take flaps 1 now to start slowing us down.
1.
Localizer's alive, and I'll engage the approach button. Glide slope alive as well now. I'm just going to defer a little while before I select flaps 2. I don't want to get it too early as we'll be too slow on the approach. "14 miles to run, and I'll set flaps 2.
Flaps 2.
But I'll hold off lowering the gear until we get to about 7 miles. Okay, just over 6 miles left to go. I'll lower the gear now.
To check, sir, if everything is okay with the light.
Gear down.
Arm the flaps.
Spoilers arm.
Quick look at the MCDU here. I just want to see if any changes have been made as regards the go-around procedure. As we can see, there's nothing. I'm just heading for the runway now. Nothing written in here for the go-around. Let's see what happens. I can see the line that it's supposed to take, the blue line here. Whether it will or not, I don't know. We'll just have to see. Let's take flaps 3 here. And finally full flaps.
Full.
So what I'm going to do is I'll simulate a go around once we get down to 300 or 200 feet or so, and let's see what happens.
Go around. Flaps.
Go around, missed approach.
Gear up.
Raise the gear, we've got positive climb.
Flaps 3.
I should in fact have set 2000 here before we came in as part of the descent, but there we are.
Flaps 2.
As we can see, we're following the blue line at the moment. Not clear to me why, but we are. And we've just blown straight through 2,000 feet and we're still climbing. Make sure that we're in manage mode for that, which we are.
Flaps 1. Flaps 0.
2,000.
Wow. Got ourselves in a severe state of worry here. Speed is way too high. I'm going to pull it back to climb manually. No indication on the PFD to do so, but I think it's prudent to do so. We shouldn't be exceeding 250 knots below 10,000 feet anyway. That seems to be settling itself down. Let's sort out the lights while we're here. That's what the MCDU says now as well. We appear to be... oh, there we are. Jammed. Okay, so the MCDU on the flight plan page basically has nothing to say for itself. So I would have expected to see the go around information in here and then the option to go to an alternate airfield. But of course we weren't able to enter an alternate or indeed a route to it. So going back here then to the MCDU, let's see what we get on the display. And what we get is out to Neras, where I suppose we would take the hold pattern and that would be our lot. Okay, so let's see, let's try and simulate getting instructions to go to 4,000 feet first of all, which is where we'd need to be in the hold at Neras. So it's taking that on board and doing that, that's fine. Down to the MCDU, and I want to go for the destination. Same runway, ILS 04 left. The board 6C star. Via Neras. And insert that. And nothing is showing on the flight plan page at all. Let's take a quick look at the PFD. It is showing it. Okay. That's not very helpful, really, is it? So, what can we do at this stage? Could we try changing the destination? Let's go LFML. Nope, it's not interested in that. Okay. Let's try doing a direct to. Direct to Neras and see if that is going to redraw the flight plan for us. Nothing there. Let's have a look at the MCDU. Sorry, the nav display. Okay, so it's redrawn on there. That's good. Let's reduce the scale a bit. So hopefully what we should do then is get to Neras and fly a loop to come back. Then we'll be flying the DME arc again, so we can try to make an approach to land this time. Let's see what happens. So to summarise at the point that we're at, we've done the go around, a missed approach at Nice. The idea then was to start flying the go-around pattern before simulating being vectored to our alternate destination, which would have been Marseille Airport, Lima Foxtrot Mike Lima. But I cannot find a way to enter that into the MCDU at this stage of the flight. As you can see, I can't enter anything that will show on the MCDU. I get a kind of rudimentary indication on the navigation display of where we're headed, but nothing on the MCDU. So I've managed to cram in, I suppose, an approach back into Nice, but that seems to be the only options I can get just now. So we've come well left of track at the moment. I'm wondering whether that's because it wants to give it a bit of space as we try to fly around the waypoint and head back in the direction we need to go. I'm hoping that's the case. But it doesn't seem to be. Let's put this on the nav display. Okay, so that's a challenge. Nothing showing on the MCDU. I've got stuff showing on the nav display, but it appears to be ignoring it. Okay, I'm going to fly this by hand at the moment then, I think. So let's come back to 280, I think. I'll take control of it. It's quite fiddly trying to dial these numbers in sometimes. Okay, I think I'll try and fly this by hand then. I can't seem to get the MCDU or the FMGS to engage with this. Hopefully I'll be able to get the ILS approach to work. If not, I'll fly that by hand as well, and let's just see how we do. So given that we have an emergency, I think it's wholly reasonable that I fly direct to the waypoint here, which seems to be more a heading of 270, so let's see if I can fly direct to that instead. Oh no! So I now appear to have lost my primary flying display and the ECAMs. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Let's try swapping over the PFD and the ND, see if it makes any difference. No is the obvious answer. I've lost ISIS here as well. I have had better days. Let's try and redraw. I had it and then it went. Deary, deary. You can't make this stuff up, can you? Why am I losing some of the electronics? I do not know. Well, that's irksome. So, my second approach in to land at Nice, I have lost a great part of the navigation display. I've lost a lot of the information showing on the pages here on the ECAM. The ECAM has completely gone. My MCDU is as much use as a handbrake in a canoe. Can't imagine what might have caused any of this, other than a glitch in the software, which is my natural first resort when things have gone like they have. Well, let's try and struggle through. Let's see what I can do. Train shows, okay. I show the overhead view. I'm not quite sure what that's trying to show me. Change the range again, because when I do that I get to see the screen for a little bit. Little bit being the operative phrase here, I think. So not doing too bad. I might want to come right a few degrees, but I'm inclined to leave it where it is, really. I wonder, let's just try to change views to outside the aircraft, then back in, or even between the first officer. Okay, that's not made any difference. Let's go to an external shot. Okay, back into the cockpit. Excellent, no difference whatsoever. Heidi-ho. Oh, that's interesting. Ah, so I switched to VOR and now suddenly they've all lit up again. Go back to ARC display. Lost. VOR. And it's all fine. Let's try switching on the first officers. Oops. Nope. Switch to ARC and it's lost. Put it on VOR. We have something. How about landing system? That's okay. ARC. Nothing. Plan. Nope. Nav. Nope. Okay, so I am very close, 20-mile range. I need to turn to the right now. So our heading in is 043 for the ILS. So I think what I'm going to do is to go for 10 degrees for an intercept. 13 degrees I suppose, to play on the safe side. Yeah, maybe come left just a tad more, because heading towards NI7 seems like a good idea to me. If that's roughly vertical in the screen, that's going to be in the right location. It's like a partial panel test, this, isn't it? That's where it would be handy, I suppose, to be able to change the first officer's view over to something else, because we know that when I flip this back to a VOR or an LS view, that the ECAMs become operative again. I'm watching for the localizer diamond to start moving so I can engage the approach button. There we are. Now hopefully that will engage. There we go. Phew. And then let's switch this over to the landing system page and I can get the ECAMs back. Okay, I'm a bit fast here. I need to engage the approach phase, although how I'm supposed to do that is another question altogether. Let's go performance, approach phase confirm.
Activated.
Good, that'll slow us down. So everything should be back in managed mode now, but let me just triple check. That's the speed, the heading, the altitude, all in managed mode. For some reason that turned off the approach, but let's re-engage. So we have the localizer and the glide slope, that's good. Heading down toward green dot speed when... come on. I can deploy flaps 1. Not a good idea to deploy speed flaps here when we're on the approach, but I'm in
Spoilers half.
a bit of trouble. I need to do something to
Spoilers full.
try and slow us down. I'm going to take flaps 1 now.
Flaps 1. Spoilers half. Spoilers retracted. Flaps 2. Radio altimeter alive.
Need to check, sir, if everything is okay with the light.
Gear down.
Need to check, sir, if everything is okay with the light.
1000.
Spoilers arm. Flaps 3. Flaps full.
$500. $400.
Land green checked.
$300. $200. 100 above. 100. Minimum. 40. 30. 20. 10. 5.
Ground spoilers. Reverse green. Decel. 70 knots.
Nice landing, sir.
Autopilot must be disengaged, sir.
Never mind, autopilot must be disengaged. That parking brake has a life of its own on a landing. It really does. Okay, let's take that off. So, as I'm taxiing to the gate, here's my summary of the MCDU in the JARDesign A330. From the very beginning, programming the MCDU has proven difficult.
Flaps 1.
I could not find a way to enter an alternate destination. Each airway and waypoint pair had to be entered separately, which proved both slow and cumbersome. Altitude and speed constraints that should be picked up from the AirRack were either ignored or not indicated on the MCDU. I could not find a way to enter speed constraints. Though I was able to enter altitude constraints, the JARDesign A330 decided to ignore them and enter its own value. Constraints won't show on the MCDU flight plan page until both block fuel and a full flight plan have been entered. Even then, only altitude constraints are shown. The MCDU showed no details of the go-around procedure for our destination, but it did draw it on the navigation display. The track drawn on the MCDU indicated that we needed to make a left turn immediately after takeoff. This is an unrealistic and dangerous manoeuvre. By contrast, the Aerosoft Airbus drew an intercept with that line at a point that was both realistic and safe. During flight, more strange behaviour was evidenced. The JARDesign A330 decided to ignore the Rattenberg waypoint and opted instead to perform a left turn well short of it. In real life, this would put the aircraft perilously close to the mountains on that side of the valley. Some of the junctions drawn on the nav display were simply bizarre. Performing a go-around had the effect of completely wiping the contents of the MCDU. I couldn't find a way to enter a new destination into the MCDU. After re-entering the star and approach for the original destination, the JARDesign A330 wouldn't fly it, leaving me no choice but to fly by hand. For no apparent reason, the navigation display became corrupted and both ISIS and ECAM screens blanked out. Flying a DME arc consisted of flying a series of bites of the arc rather than a consistent bank angle. All in all then, a poor experience, and one which has a major effect on the score. Just 1 star out of 5. That concludes part 4 of my review of the JARDesign A330. Join me next time when I'll wrap up this review series and provide my overall opinion and score. Until then, thanks for watching.